Welcome to God's Living Word of Translation. I'm your host, Stephen Light. I want to thank you for joining me today. And today's living word is the sea. Yes, the sea. And so we're going to go over that today. As we go through these scriptures, I might just go ahead and give you the spiritual revelation of it so we have an understanding before we start to look at it, which the sea, which is the sea of humanity, or the deep, or the pit, as the spiritual revelation of this throughout the Bible. So let's take a glance of where we start to see the sea in the book of Genesis. And we will take a look at Genesis chapter 1 and verse 2. And it says here, "And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep." So we see here in verse 2, we won't read the rest of it. We'll stop at the deep because this is where we're going to see the sea here, or the first definition. And this definition of deep is the abyss. The deep, the main sea. So that is the definition here of deep, the main sea, the abyss. And there's several definitions. The roaring and raging sea is also a definition. The salt sea, or the pit. And these definitions of the sea throughout the Bible. So now let's continue on with this sea and understand a little bit about the sea, what comes out of the sea, just to understand how God views the sea. Let's go to Revelation chapter 13. Revelation chapter 13 and verse 1. And he says, "I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy." So we see here where the beast rises up out of the sea, here in Revelation 13, and he has 7 heads and 10 horns. So we see this is where the beast comes up out of, in the sea, or the deep, or the pit, the bottomless pit, or the abyss, or out of the sea of humanity. And these 7 heads, in case people are wondering, maybe be the first time you're hearing this, but the 7 heads are the 7 ruling nations throughout the history of the Bible. So, and this system's been working all this time. So the first was Egypt, then Assyria, then Babylon, then Persia, then Greece, then Rome, and then Papal Rome, or Church Authority Rome, after the Roman Empire fell. So those are the seven heads. So let's go on and look at another example. Let's go back to Revelation 11 and verse 7. Book of Revelation, chapter 11, verse 7. "And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascended out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them and kill them." And he's talking about the 2 witnesses there that prophesy here in the book of Revelation. But we see here, this time it says, come out of the bottomless pit. And over here, 2 chapters later, the beast rises up out of the sea, which is the same. The pit and the sea, or the sea of humanity, is where the beast does rise up out of. Does that kind of make sense? Maybe. Maybe not. Somebody say it. Let's keep on going so we can take a look at the sea, how God uses the word sea throughout the Bible. Let's go over to Luke chapter 8 and verse 30. Luke chapter 8 and verse 30. "And Jesus asked him, saying, What is thy name? And he said, Legion, because many devils were entered into him. And they besought him that he should not command them to go out into the deep. So here we see again that they're begging him, don't send them to the deep. What deep? The definition of this word again, once again, out of the Greek, it's depthless, bottomless pit, abyss, deep, bottomless pit. So those are the definition of that deep, the bottomless pit, the abyss, or the sea. You see, the same word, the deep. This is how God's language works, using it in many different ways, talking about the same thing. So we see they was begging him, don't cast him out to the deep, to the sea. But just remember that we all have to go through the sea. You say, why would we have to go through the sea? Well, just like Moses had to lead his people through the sea, he had to cross through the Red Sea that was parted for him. Is that correct? The same for you. You have to go through the sea yourself. And just like Jesus calmed the sea, do you remember when he calmed the sea for the apostles on the boat? You see, the sea is raging. It's a roaring sea. And the sea is controlled by the moon. See, the tides of the sea are controlled by the moon. And what is the moon? Is the moon represented in the Bible as? The powers of the devil, you see. And it controls the sea of humanity. The deep. The people that are in the deep. And what is the deep? If you look down, or a bottomless pit, if you looked into a hole, just somewhere, a hole anywhere, in the physical sense, you look down, you couldn't see the bottom, it'd be a bottomless pit, correct? This is the same in the spiritual world of God, falling away from God. And there's no depth which you can fall away from him. You see, you're away from God. So let's keep going on, and let's keep taking a look at some examples of the sea so we can get a better look at it. Let's go to Psalms. The book of Psalm, chapter 68. And verse 22. Psalms chapter 28, verse 22. And the Lord said, I will bring again from Bashan. I will bring my people again from the depths of the sea. He will bring his people from the depths of the sea, from the pit, from the abyss of the sea. Because as we know, pearls come from the sea also. Is that not correct? Just like you can take a lump of coal with enough pressure and heat and turn it into a diamond. Pearls come out of the sea. So we can't bring forth his people from the sea, but we all have to go through it. And we have to go through the affliction part, you see, through the tribulation part of the sea. Let's go and take a look at that example. Let's go to Psalms 89, chapter 89. Psalms chapter 89 and verse 9. Thou rulest the raging of the sea. When the waves thereof arise, they stillest them. See, God, or Christ, just like Jesus did, where he calmed the seas for the apostles. God can calm the seas for you, just like he did Moses. He can part the sea where you can pass through. But you still have affliction. This is how you learn, right? This is the learning process. But we still have to pass through with affliction to be taught. God said, Every son he receiveth, he chastises, or he corrects. This is where the correction is. As we go through the sea, we are being corrected to learn how to handle these situations. Let's look at Zechariah. Zechariah 10. Zechariah chapter 10 and verse 11. Zechariah 10 and verse 11. And he shall pass through the sea with affliction, and shall smite the waves in the sea, and all the deeps of the river shall dry up, and the pride of Assyria shall be brought down, and the scepter of Egypt shall depart away. So we do have to go through the sea with affliction. And it's basically because the sea is salt. The salt sea, you see. And if you put salt, how many know if you've ever put salt on like a piece of watermelon, a piece of fruit? It makes it sweeter, right? So what's he trying to do? As you go through the salt sea, he's seasoning you, right? To make you sweet. Huh? So when people talk to you, you're sweet, huh? You get to get the non-sweetness out of you. You got to go through the salt sea. You see, to be seasoned. Let's go over to Mark and take a look at this. The Gospel of Mark, chapter 9 and verse 49. 9 and 49. Mark, Gospel of Mark, 9 and 49. For everyone shall be salted with fire, and every sacrifice shall be salted with salt. Salt is good, but if the salt has lost its saltness, wherewith will ye season it? Have salt in yourselves, and have peace one to another. You see? Everyone shall be salted with fire. And we already have studied the fire and the Holy Ghost. The fire burning out everything. It's not like God in you to go on to perfection. This is going through the sea, the salt sea. You're going through these things, and you're being salted with fire, but you're being sweetened along the way in the sea. But you won't stay in the sea. You'll come through the sea to the other side. So now let's get in here a little bit deeper into the sea. And I'm gonna show you some things that you may not never understood that may bring some blessings to you. Let's take a look go back to the book of Revelation and try to understand some things of what God's saying. So the book of Revelation, chapter 18 and verse 17. Revelation 18 and 17. Matter of fact, let's go back up to 16 and start. You get the context of it. And saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. This is Babylon, by the way, if you read up in the first part of the chapter. For in 1 hour so great riches has come not. Every shipmaster and all the company in ships and the sailors, as many as trade by the seas, stood afar off. And verse 18, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, who? Babylon, saying, What city is like unto this great city? The merchants, the ships, the shipmasters. And don't worry, this isn't something physical. If you work for a living on a ship or a merchant, this is a spiritual revelation of churches. This is written to the churches. See, the ships here are the fellow ships that ride on top of the sea and across the sea. And the shipmasters, of course, are the heads of these fellowships. So we can see here that we want to get a look at this, how he doesn't have a good light of these merchants and these ships and these sailors that trade by the sea. But this, remember, this is a spiritual revelation in the systems of religion. It's what he's saying. That's what Babylon is. It's an opposite of the bride. And this is why up in 18:5 or 18:4 up here in the book of Revelation chapter 18, he says, I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, that you receive not of her plagues. You see, come out of her, my people. God's people, come out of her. Babylon. Why are they even in there? But that's for another study of Babylon. Let's stick to the sea. So I just wanted to get the context of talking about the ships, because this is going to, this may bless you. This is going to be some stuff maybe you've never seen before. So now let's go over and take another little look at talking about ships. Let's go to Jonah. The book of Jonah. Chapter 1, verse 1. Jonah, chapter 1, verse 1. Now the word of the Lord came unto Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, arise and go to Nineveh, that great city. There's another great city that he just called Babylon, and cry against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah, of course, he rose up, and he flee unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord, and went down to Joppa, and found a ship going to Tarshish. And he paid the fare thereof, and went down into it, to go with them into Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. So what did he do? He was supposed to go to Nineveh to prophesy, but he got on the ship. The ship to Tarshish. And who else tried to hide themselves from the presence of the Lord? Remember Adam tried to hide himself from the presence of the Lord also. And of course, if you go on down and read through this, and this first chapter, these are religious people that he got on, showing that this is the church, because in verse 8 of this same chapter, then they said, these are the people on the ship. Now they're upset because God just up above there said he was going to start to make the sea rough on them, and it's tossing their boat to where it's going to break it. And then they said, this is what they say in verse 8 of the chapter 1 of Jonah. Then said they unto him, tell us, we pray thee. See, we pray thee. For whose cause is this evil? They knew it was evil. Why? Because they're religious. They want to know why is this evil upon us? He said, what is thy occupation? And whence comest thou? What is thy country? And what people art thou? This is what they're asking Jonah now, you know? And if you skip on down, you saying, he tells him, Jonah says that I fear the Lord of God of heaven, which made the sea and the dry lands, what he says to him. And then were the men exceedingly afraid, and said unto him, why hast thou done this? They know what he's done now. For the men knew that he had fled from the presence of the Lord. You see, they're religious. They wouldn't even believe in anything of God. They would have no knowledge that he fled from the presence of the Lord when he says, oh, you know, if they didn't even believe in God, they would say, oh, well, we don't even believe in him anyway. But they do. They knew that he had done something. Let's go over to Jonah chapter 2. Jonah 2 and 2. And here's Jonah. And said, I cried by the reason of my affliction. See? Cast him into the sea. Affliction unto the Lord. And he heard me out of the belly of hell. And cried I, thou heardest my voice. Out of the belly of hell. He was in the whale, wasn't he? Or the great fish. Verse 3, for thou hast cast me into the deep, to the abyss, in the midst of the seas. Did you hear it? He was cast into the deep. Where we just heard Jesus, where they begged him, don't cast him into the deep. Don't cast me into the bottomless pit. You see? Or the abyss, or the deep, the definition. Right in the middle of the seas where he cast him. And where was he at? In the belly of hell. Because he didn't go to Nineveh, the prophecy, like God wanted him to. He tried to hide himself in the ship to Tarshish. Same thing that Adam did when he tried to hide himself from the present. He sowed fig leaves. Didn't have any fruit though, just the leaves. That's for a whole nother story too. But let's go over now that we see that here, an example of someone else getting on a ship and not going to where he was told. And he's crying out of the belly of hell because he was cast into the deep, into the midst of the seas. I want to show you something you may never see. Let's go back over to Genesis. God just quickened this to me, and maybe I should read this. I wasn't planning on it, but let's go over to Genesis 1 and 21. And we ain't going to read this whole verse, but Genesis chapter 1, verse 21. And God created great whales. We'll just stop there because this is what I want to get to. Now understand this word whale. What do you think it means? Well, we know what a whale is, Steve. They're out in the ocean out there, in the seas out there. I want you to listen to this definition, and then we're going to go on and read some of these other verses. It's going to make sense to you. The definition here is a marine monster or a land monster. That is a sea serpent or a jackal, a dragon. A dragon or a serpent, a sea monster. This is what the whale is, the dragon or the serpent. Now, we'll go back over and we're going to read a few things that may open up some light to you about some scriptures that maybe never even thought about. Let's go over to Isaiah 23. Isaiah 23, chapter 23, verse 1. And the burden of Tyre, howl, you ships. This word howl, wail, right? Yell. How does ships yell? This wooden ships. How do they speak? Of Tarshish, for it is laid waste, so that there is no house, no entering in from the land of Chittim. It is revealed to them. Be still, you inhabitants of the isle. This is verse 2. Thou whom the merchants of Zidon, you know what that word Zidon means? It means fishermen. These fishermen, they fish for fish. Now, somehow, when I've done these things before, I can say the waters is people, and all these things are people. You know, trees are people, right? In the Bible represent, and somehow they just can't get some of these things, but yet they are driving around with the fish on the back of their car. So I think you would understand that Zidon is the fishers. They're fishermen of men that pass over the sea, have replenished. They've replenished these merchants, and by great waters, by great people, nations and tongues, the seed or children of Sior. What is that definition? Sior means to be dark, turbid, a stream of Egypt. Dark. These waters of the children of the dark are turbid. The harvest of the river, there it is her revenue. And she is marked of nations. Her revenue is the river, just like Babylon's revenue is a river too, Euphrates River, on the banks of Euphrates. Let's go to verse 4. Be thou ashamed, O Zidon, for the sea has spoken. The sea is speaking. Not those waves out there that you know of, the physical sea. People. Even the strength of the sea. Saying. Now this is the sea saying. These are the people on the sea, the deep. I travail not, nor bring forth children. Neither do I nourish up young men or bring up virgins. She doesn't travail. And what I've been telling you in all these podcasts, you are trying to travail to birth what? Christ. Right? Trying to birth Christ. But these they're not bringing forth any children of Christ. You see? And this is the sea speaking. The sea doesn't bring forth Christ. It doesn't travail. It's not a virgin. The bride has to be a virgin. That's not physically. They never have sex. This is a spiritual revelation that God uses as you not having other relations other than him. He's your husband, Christ. You see, you're not running around with idols and other systems that doesn't have the truth of the relation of Christ in you, bringing forth Christ in you. He's the husband. You're the bride. The church is the bride. So you can see here this sea is saying that they don't bring children. Right? And so let's take a look at Psalms. Go back to Psalms. And this is where the dragon or the whale is going to come into play and make sense of Jonah. Right? He was in the belly of hell, right? So let's go to Psalms 104. Way down. Chapter 104, verse 25. So as this great and wide sea, wherein are things creeping, innumerable, both small and great beast, which is that definition of living creature in this instance, there go the ships. There is that Leviathan, whom thou hast made to play therein. So Leviathan, which is actually a study of the four crown princes of hell, but in here, Leviathan, the definition is a sea monster, a dragon, a serpent, a symbol of Babylon. Did you hear it? What was the definition of the whale? So there's goes those ships, those fellowships. There's that Leviathan. This is where he works. But look at the next line under him. Whom thou hast made to play therein. Who made him? God to play in there. It's where he plays in the sea. You see? That wasn't a pun, but that's where he plays. In the sea, in the deep, in the abyss, in the pit. Now that might come to light. Now remember, the dragon, right? And who is Leviathan? So let's, before we go over and take a look at this to kind of put it together, let's go to Isaiah. Let's go to the book of Isaiah 27 and 1. In that day, the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. The Lord will, the dragon that's in the sea. This is where he works, in the sea of humanity, in the deep. Right? Let's go over and see an example of something now. Now remember, it was said that the seed does not travail. and bring forth children, right? Let's go to Revelation. I remember something we've read before. Revelation 12 and verse 1. 12 and verse 1. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet. This is the devil under her feet, the powers of the devil. And upon her head a crown of 12 stars, which is sonship. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth. Did you hear it? And pain to be delivered. This woman is clothed with the sun. God, clothed with light, the light covering, and has the moon, or the devil, under her feet. Now what's the dragon try to do? This dragon said that in verse 3 here, it said there appeared another wonder in heaven. And behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. Right? So he has 7 heads. What are the 7 heads? They're the 7 ruling nations throughout the Bible that he's always been working through. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and church authority, or Papal Rome, after Rome had fallen. But if you go on down here in verse 4, at the very bottom of that verse, you see that the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. He doesn't want Christ to be born. He doesn't want us to bring forth children of Christ. You see? He wants to stop that. Who? The dragon. Who? Leviathan. And where does he work out? In the sea. You see? In the sea. In the bottomless pit. In the deep. In the abyss. But what do we want to do? Now here's what we want to do. We want the birth of Christ. Right? Let's go to Revelation 15. Verse 2. And I saw, as it were, a sea of glass mingled with fire. What did he say? You're going to be salted with the fire. You have to go through the sea. We all have to go through the sea. What we're being salted with the fire. That's what it said in the Gospel of Mark. Why? As I said, to make us sweet. So we're sweet fruit. You see? And it says, and we continue on, and them that had gotten the victory over the beast, and over his image, and over his mark, and over the number of his name, stand on the sea of glass. These people, they get the victory over the beast, over his image, over his mark, over the number of his name, which is 666, which is man, man, man. The number 6 is the number of man. Man sinned against the Father, sinned against the Son, he's sinning against the Holy Ghost. 666. We got to get over his number of the fleshly man and become spiritual. We can stand on the sea of glass. And what is the sea of glass? It's smooth. You see, the sea has waves up and down in people's lives. And these people live with their emotions. So when things are going good, they're happy as can be. When things are not, they're sad as can be. And what's God trying to teach us by us going through the sea with affliction and salt, seasoning us, to learn to be happy no matter what's going on. Even when we're going through the bad times, we're praising God and we're happy because we know we're being seasoned. You see? So a sea of glass is smooth, no more up and down. And we're standing on it, so it's under our feet, just like we read back there in Revelation 12. Right? The moon was under her feet. So let's go. Let's keep going on. And so we can see we want to stand on the sea of glass. So let's go over to 20. But what do we have to do to make this happen? Let's actually go over to 21, the ultimate, what we want to see happen. Revelation chapter 21, verse 1. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And what happens in the next verse? No more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven, prepared as a bride. We become a bride. You see, we can become a bride because we've been salted and purified with the fire, getting the infirmities out of us. So we can become a spotless, as he said, bride. Pure bride. That's where we need to go. But how do we need to get there? Well, let's go over to Revelation, one chapter back. Revelation 20. Chapter 20. And verse 1. And it says here, I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit. He's got the key, this angel. And a great chain. And who said they had the key of death and hell? This was Jesus said he had the key of death and hell. And a great chain in his hand. Who's the links of the chain? We are. And he laid hold on the dragon. You hear it? That old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him. You see? He bound him. He takes hold of the dragon that's in the sea, right? They cast him into the sea, to the bottomless pit, this pit within you. But you want to get to where you have no more sea. You got to bind him, right? Is that correct? You got to bind him. And don't loose him. And he says for 1,000 years. People say, well, it's just 1,000 years. And then it says on down here, he's loosed again. Let me ask you something here. He could be bound in me. This is the individual. It'd be loosed in you, listening here. Right? He could be loosed, bound in one of you, and loosed in another one, someone else that you know. This is the individual thing between you and God. And each one of us has to do it. But he can be bound, and that's what we're trying to do. The main thing is that we got to bind him. We have to bind him. He has to be bound. And let's take a look at Matthew. Let's go over to Matthew. Because why? Because this is what happens to each individual one of us has to do the binding. You can't go to somewhere and then one person is binding it for everyone. It's you individually. Matthew 18 and verse 18. It says, verily I say unto you, whatsoever you shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever you shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Did you hear that? Whatever you can bind right here in your physical body, right here on earth, your earth, can be bound in the heavenly realm that you're in, because we just read over here in Revelation 21, right? The first heaven and the first earth were passed away, right? And a new heaven and a new earth, right? So whatever you loosed or you bind right here is bound in the heavenly realm. The higher elevation as you move upward with God. And whatever's loosed is loosed. You see? And where's he bound to? In the deep, into the sea, into the pit, right? Into the abyss. You bind him to the lower areas of you, not in the higher elevations of you. What's the highest elevation of you? Your head, your mind. You bind him in your feet. You see? You stand on him in the feet, away from the mind, away from your middle, from the midst of you, your spirit. So that's a look at the sea, and I hope that kind of made sense to you. The sea, or the pit, that's how God uses the sea throughout the whole Bible. But eventually, if you get a new earth and a new heaven, and you can bind the devil within you, and you can move up to a higher elevation and let the old heaven and the old earth view and become a new earth or a new creation in Christ. As you might have listened to the last podcast with the new wine, in Christ, you're a new creation. And you can bind him and move up and have no more sea, the hold of these spirits within you. All right, well, I hope you got something out of this today on the sea. And I hope that you join me next time when we bring forth a new living word. And until then, God bless, and see you soon.